One of the most wonderful things about working with Node.js is the size and general activity level of the online community. No matter what functionality you want to add to your web application or your servers or something, chances are somebody has already written that and published it as a package or a module somewhere for you to use. The primary tool we're going to use to work with these packages or module is the Node Package Manager, or NPM for short. We showed you way back in lesson 1 that this is installed with your Node packages or your installers or your binary releases or even from the source, so it should already be there and in your path waiting for you to work with. You can type npm or npm help to see a list of the commands, and the primary way we're going to install modules is with the npm install command. But first, I need to find something to install, and to do that, I'm going to use npm search. Let's search for a web framework. This will go to the remote server, it'll click and whir and do a bit of stuff, and then it'll give us a big long list with the name of the package, a description, the publisher, and the publish date. So we're going to work our way back through this list, and it's a bit longer than I thought. There it is. Let's work with a little package here called Express, which is a neat little web application framework. To install it, let's make a little test subfolder. And let's go into test, and then let's use npm install express like that. This is now going to go to the server and say let's bring down Express, and you can see here though it also looks like it's bringing down a bunch of other stuff. When it's done, it tells us exactly what it did, which was install the latest version of Express, and Express itself depends on a bunch of other components or packages which were also brought down and installed. If I do a directory listing, you'll now see I have a new folder called Node Modules. If I go into Node Modules, you see there is the package called Express, and it also created this .bin directory. Some packages may choose to have skeleton generating programs or other utilities that you can run in your computer. So if it does, by default, npm will put it in there. But for now, let's just focus on the Express folder. You'll see here in the Express folder I have a file called package.json, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. It has a README for sort of descriptions or basic documentation up on the package management site. It has a lib folder, which is where most of the source for the framework will live. And you'll see actually though that the Express package also has its own Node Modules subfolder. And you'll see it itself depends or uses and requires a number of other packages or modules. And this can keep going as much as we want. I can go to connect, and you'll see connect itself depends on a bunch of other frameworks. So if I look at Node Modules there, you'll see I can just keep going on. I can have Node Modules framework and Node Modules. This can just keep going on quite a long time. So let's go back, and in our test folder here, let's create a file called test.js. And let's look a little bit more at the require command or require function and how Node knows where to find things. So let's first say var http equals require http. We've seen that before. We've seen fs or URL or query string or something. Let's include the Express framework we just downloaded like that. Okay. Now the way in general the require function works is by default it looks at the package name and says, is that built in? If it is one of the built-in ones like HTTP or FS like we've seen before, or query string or URL, it just loads those from the built-in modules. However, if it's not a built-in module, it needs to know where to look for things. And in the previous part, we wrote this function that printed out the contents of the module global variable. Let's go back and run that again. One of the things on this module global variable is a list of paths, and this is actually where Node goes ahead and looks for things to load. By default, when I'm searching for things, I go look in the subfolder called Node Modules, and I look there to see if the module is there right underneath Node Modules. If not, I start working my way up the path, removing one component at a time, looking in that directory's Node Modules subfolder to see if A, that Node Modules exists, and then B, if the module I'm looking for, in this case, Express, lives under that folder. If not, it looks in the root directory for node modules. If it finds it, it looks there. If not, it then goes and looks in some sort of default central location, which on most Unix-like machines will be on user local lib node modules, and on Windows it'll be somewhere under users, username, local data, or something like that, or app data. Okay, so it goes and looks through all of those paths for the name of the module. If it finds it, it loads it. If not, it throws an error. There's one more case that we saw in the previous part, and that was with our greeter. And that is if your module name begins with a path component, namely a dot slash, or it can be a slash, or it can be a dot dot slash. If it begins with one of those, NPM treats that as a path to a module to include and tries to load it from there. If I don't include a .js extension, it will first go and look for a folder called greeter and look for a package.json and see if it's that kind of module. If it does not have that, it'll then look for a file called greeter.js. If I don't want it to search in a folder, I can just actually say from the beginning, please load the module greeter.js or something like that. So that's the basics of how Node goes and includes modules and requires them, and sort of finds them. Let's go back to test here. If I know that there's a new version of a package that I'm using, and if I know that a new version has been published on NPM and I want to include that or work with that, I can use the npm update command. And what that does is it goes through my list of packages and just makes sure I've always got the latest and greatest version. And once it's checked that out, it says, yep, great. It fixes that up and makes sure that is all up to date. To see a list of all the modules I'm working with, in case I've forgotten, I can use the npm ls command, and that prints out a nice little tree of everything I've got like that. Okay, so one last thing I'd like to talk about when working with modules, and to me it's one of the most powerful things about the Node package management system, is what happens if two components or two modules include the same subcomponent. I've had a problem frequently with sort of other languages and other package management systems where if two modules need to use another module, if there's a versioning problem with that, I run into problems. For example, if I'm using a mail widget and I'm using the latest version of that mail widget, version 2, but I'm also using a web framework, and that web framework only wants version 1 of that mail widget, you often have versioning problems and everything clashes, and you have often everything just breaks. In Node, it's a little bit different. Let's say that I'm writing my project here, and my project in main.js requires a mail widget thing. So right here under my Node modules, I'm going to have mail widget installed. I'm also working with another Node module called maybe special widget, and special widget itself uses a version of mail widget, but it uses an older version called version 1, and you'll see here in special widget it requires that. The way Node namespacing works is there is no global namespace. When I require something, that thing is put into the current module's namespace. And similarly, when some other thing requires something, whatever it requires, that is also put into its own local private namespace. The magic of this is every sort of individual module is free to use whatever version of any other module it wants, and that will be private to itself. If two people here do use this top-level mail widget, they'll sort of get the same implementation of it. But if different modules use different versions of the same widget, they'll get their own versions, and I'm guaranteed to sort of get the functionality I expect. And everything just sort of works very, very intuitively. And to me, this is one of the hugest things about the Node. It's about the Node package management system. It's really one of the first package managers I've ever used where I don't have this versioning namespace nightmare. There is a bit of a sort of higher cost. I have sort of two very similar implementations of the mail widget, but the increase in sort of reliability and just knowledge that everything is going to work exactly like I expect is absolutely vital to me. And so I really enjoy this new way of doing things, and it's very intuitive. So that's our introduction to NPM and working with and requiring modules and everything. So in the next section, we'd like to go ahead and well, write a module that we can use with NPM.